What's up, everybody? Coming up on March 15th, that's our next virtual screening of Left at Wall. I will be there along with other cast members. If you want to attend, drop me an email. Go to romplicone.com, email me, and that's all it takes. Basically, for patrons, it's free. For non-patrons, $5 is the recommended donation, but nobody will be denied due to lack of funds. So just go ahead and email me, and I'll see you on March 15th. Other screenings coming up, March 18th, Washington, D.C., March 22nd, a show screening Q&A in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Get your tickets, Pittsburgh. I can't wait to see you. Chris Moen's going to be on that show as well. April 14th, Los Angeles, California, the big party screening in Los Angeles. April 14th, get your tickets. And June 8th, Idlewild, California. We're doing a show screening and Q&A in Idlewild, California. Tickets and all information at romplicone.com. Episode 26, Melanie Chartoff. Melanie Chartoff is an actor, voiceover artist, and author. I first met Melanie when we were on a show together for the Funny Times, a syndicated newspaper we're both a part of. She writes a column for them, and they carry Lucy and Ron, the comic that I write. Melanie did a reading. Her prose were incredible, and she crushed. Among her extensive list of credits, she voiced Dee Dee Pickles in the Rugrats cartoon. That show was a huge deal, especially for millennials like me. We grew up with that show, and years later, different memes and segments have circulated because many of the messages in that show went over our head when we were kids, and as adults, we appreciate it even more. I talk about that with her. She even mentioned some other details around the show that I didn't remember and definitely would have went over my head when I first watched it too. It was really cool to talk shop about such a significant show from my youth with someone who was a big part of it. Please welcome to the show, Melanie Chartoff. Melanie Chartoff, how are you? Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Glad I could get here. I'm in my house. So the office is just like complicated. It's just complicated. But yes, glad to be with you here.
Indeed. So I actually kind of want to go backwards a little bit with this one. I want to start with your writing. I got to read some of your essays, but for anyone who's not familiar with your work, kind of unpack that. What got you into writing? Talk about the different types of writing you've done, because there is a lot of it, and kind of what led you into that world.
Well, I actually was, when I was a kid, I was writing. I got poems published in the New Haven Register, my hometown paper. I wrote a play in the 4th grade, which was put on in the New Haven area, but I didn't get to play the lead in the play that I wrote, and that's when I decided to be an actor. I think I was 12. Mm-hmm. And then I worked at the Children's Theater in New Haven at Long Wharf Theater, and did a lot of local theater at Yale University. When they needed a girl, there I was. But I've always written all kinds of things, poems, speeches, satirical stuff. And I started writing for Chicken Soup for the Soul about 10 years ago. I've sold about, 6 stories to them. So I do soft writing and edgy writing, depending on the publication. I've written for McSweeney's and the New York Times. But that's my side gig. My living has always been made as an actor, luckily. I'm still living.
You need to have something more conventional.
What?
I said you need to have something more conventional.
I need to have something I can run on. Right.
So how did we cross paths in person at the Funny Times event, which I'm hoping they're going to make a regular thing in Los Angeles. We'll see. Hopefully would that be great?
Would be. I love that group of people, this whole cross section of wits like yourself who have such different perspectives. It's really fun to be a part of that.
So what brought you to them?
Well, I think I mentioned when I did the show that night that I was in a friend's apartment in New York and in the bathroom, and I started reading an issue of Funny Times, and I never came out. I just thought, what is this? Why haven't I seen this funny paper before? And I was already writing for them and pitching for them, sitting on the toilet. I was already composing stuff in my head for them. And I guess I sold my first piece to them like maybe 8 years ago. And it's sporadic. I mean, I'm not a regular like Dave Barry, certainly, or Andy Browski, but I get a piece in every once in a while. If it's the right point of view. I write from different character points of view, and I think that's what works best for me with them.
Talk about your creative process a little bit as a writer. Like, do you like just sit down with a pen and paper or a keyboard? Do you kind of get inspiration that comes to you? Like just talk about your creative process.
Well, in terms of writing, a lot of it happens when I'm in conversation with people. I'll think of something that's just apropos and it'll trigger me. A lot of my writing or writing gets done like between 4 and 6 a.m. I just start dozing into a rewrite on something. It's really remarkable how my brain kind of fills in the blanks when it's that when I'm that unconscious. But I don't really sit at the computer and write it until it's pretty much formed. And then I scribble down as many ideas as I can. Sometimes I will be in my car and I'll just send a text to myself with a perfect bon mot, with the perfect phrasing, and send that. And sometimes I have disparate ideas over a year's period of time, and I'll say, well, I need more on this or I need more on this. And then I'll find an umbrella or an overweening idea that can include all of those thoughts. Mm. So I don't really have I'm not a plotter, I'm not an outliner, I'm not a professional. But of course, my process for acting is very interior. I've had very good training from Stella Adler. Harry Master George was my real secret weapon. And that's a very interior process. And when one has to do a self-tape, as most of us actors are riddled with these days, one has to go for results, which I really don't like to do. You have to go for how it will look on your camera, how you will edit it, how the lines sound. And you have to find someone to read with you off camera on FaceTime, which is what most of my students or friends do. They fill it in on FaceTime for me. So I don't actually have a person in the room. I really don't enjoy the self-taping process. It's been very, very hard adjustment for many actors. I really like being in the room with the director, having them give me guidance. There's so many ways to say, how are you? You can say, how are you from a million different perspectives. And when you have words on a page, got to run it through the right machine, and you're never sure what the right machine is because they give you adjectives, which aren't really a three-dimensional, palpable way to incarnate a character. So my process as an actor has had to alter. I'm not happy about it.
Oh, so I got to tell you the truth, and I don't do as much acting as you do, nowhere close, but I have mixed feelings because I totally get everything you're saying. Like there is something lost when you're not in the room. The other side of that, though, is, if it's in person, if I have 2 auditions, that is going to be an entire day, and I'm going to spend a lot of time in traffic. When it is 2 self-tapes, I'll probably be done before noon. I don't know. I do kind of like that a little bit.
Well, yeah, there is a trade-off. Yeah. And I think in terms of the pandemic, it really gave us the Zoom and recording process. I think everybody's relieved not to be driving to an office somewhere, paying for parking, engaging with other bacterial content. And there's an upside and a downside to each of these. My husband's a psychotherapist, and he works in an office only 1 day a week now and primarily on Zoom. And he says, yes, there has been an intimacy of one kind lost, but people are not frazzled from parking. They're not watching the clock to see when their meter runs out. They come to him more often as a consequence of it being so convenient. And also they're in the privacy of their office or home, and they don't have to worry how they look or how to collect themselves at the end of the session. So each art form, including yours here, has a trade-off. I think you and I are going to do quite well not being in the room together, but we've been in the room together before. I mean, I had a kind of a feel of you from the evening we performed, and maybe you of me, which made us think we could work together. So there's assets on both ends.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And so getting back to writing a little bit, I don't know who coined this first, but I first heard this from the novelist Chuck Palahniuk, who wrote Fight Club. He puts it this way, and I feel like this is the category I fall into, and it sounds like, based on what you said, the category you fall into as well, where it's like writing is living. like when you're living and you're getting ideas and you're getting inspiration and you're thinking, oh, I got to record that into my phone, or I gotta text that to someone or whatever. That's the writing process. When you sit down and just put it on a script form or an essay form, that's the keyboarding process. And he likes writing way more than keyboarding, but of course keyboarding is necessary. You got to do it. I abide by that school of thought. Like sometimes when I'm going on long walks, that's when I am writing. And it also happens to be one of my favorite things to do. So it's a win-win. So would you say that's you too?
Yeah, I think you say it quite well. As an actor or as a writer, I'm basically transcribing all the material in my head. Mm-hmm. When I speak a line aloud for the first time, I've never concretized it before. It's just been an amorphous feeling, mess of feelings. And the same with the writing, except the writing is also embedded with how it will be said verbally, which is so much a big part of our process. It's not just a globule of thought. It's actually a specific word delivery that gives it your special voice or my special voice.
So just to give a little bit of an asterisk to this next place I want to go, you have an incredible resume. Your credits list could be literally a book. But there's one thing in particular that has really meant so much to me just in my life, and there's a picture of it behind you, and that of course is your work on the Rugrats. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit if we could. And we talked a little bit about this off mic, but just to rehash it some, that series was such a big deal to me as a kid. And then as I grew up, I realized, thinking about it now, I realize how that series and a lot of the series around that time, but the Rugrats in particular, were light years ahead of its time. We're saying things that I don't know if you could get away with today. It was so socially progressive, and I'm sure you could give more examples than I could even, but it was so socially progressive back in the 90s. When everything was a Christmas special, the Rugrats were talking about Hanukkah and talking about things in the Jewish tradition. The Rugrats criticized capitalism. The Rugrats, like there were a ton of anti-capitalist messages in the Rugrats, which, hey, maybe that's the reason I'm a socialist today. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of reasons, but maybe that's one of them. Maybe a few seeds were planted back then. So first of all, like just to turn it over to you, having blabbered all that, talk about some of your time there.
It was such a lucky break. I just went to an audition, and then they called me back, and I got to improvise with Jack Riley, who I'd worked with before. And the way the character was described was very much like my own mother. Okay. And so for me, in my small point of view, from my role's perspective, the role was right in my wheelhouse. She was like me, only a little more anxious and like 78 RPM instead of like 45 RPM, which is the way I talk. It was very much like, in fact, if you slow her voice down, it probably sounds a lot like me. And then Minka was all my grandmothers and great-grandmothers who passed away when I was a very little girl. And I just had a kind of a faint memory, altered by all the producers who were left of liberal Jewish Los Angelinos, who had a different memory of their grandmothers. So I tried to amalgamate all of our impressions of the old Jewish woman who we know when we were younger and put it into this one character. And it was also being amended by the producers at different times who didn't want her to sound too much like Dee Dee, even though she was Dee Dee's mother. So that was kind of, I didn't realize what it would become on the lucky day that I auditioned. A year later, they invited us to a screening at Nickelodeon. And here was my voice coming out of this creature. I'd never done animation before. And it was thrilling. And then they told us they were going to do 7 of them. And I said, sure. I was doing another series, but the other series, my hours weren't completely washing out the whole day. So sometimes I could just drive over or get a cab over to the other studio and record for a half hour to an hour. And I had no idea, none of us did, what it would become. It was such a sort of a a dyad of adult speak and baby speak. All the producers on our show, these left of liberal Los Angelino Jews, had babies and infants. And they were so able to capture those moments of bewilderment and confusion on the parents' part or on the baby's part and put it into language adults and children would understand. It was kind of brilliant. One of my favorite episodes was the potty training episode, where the babies are trying to figure out how they should urinate. And they're watching Spike the dog, and they're terrified of the toilet. I mean, when I was a child, I was afraid of the toilet. To me, it was like I was going to get swept up in the tornado in The Wizard of Oz and sucked down into this vortex. So it was really a remarkable commingling of a bunch of like minds. And then they hired people who were also like-minded aging beatniks, to put across the philosophy.
I mean, it's just so beautiful. Like when you, especially when you break it down, just the layers to all of those characters. I mean, the fact that like Stu was this kind of entrepreneurial guy who never quite landed the breaks he wanted to, and that was part of it. And it was told with humor, but there was also kind of so much going on there, and
a lot of heartbreak in Stu. I mean, a lot of frustration that we all felt for him. And Dee Dee has to go on a game show at one point to save the family's reputation. So you got a sense that she was a working mother. Actually, I'm told she was a teacher, although we never had a teaching episode. To compensate. And we all had boyfriends or husbands, I suppose, not me, who were kind of slackers and had great ideas that just never came through to fruition or profit. So I think it touched a lot of sensitivities in my particular culture, young parents.
Did you ever get any pushback from the powers that be throughout that show? I mean, you don't have to like name names or anything, but did anything like that ever happen? Because I mean, it was pretty edgy, for lack of a better way to put it. Like, did any suits ever be like, "Ooh, back up a little bit"?
Not the suits so much, but my own mother was very troubled by the incarnations of Boris and Minka. My mother remembers an era of the Holocaust. She her family fled the pogroms. And to her, the depictions, the cartoon depictions, and let's face it, all cartoons make people look funny looking, really scared her. The altered noses, the voices, the stockings around the ankles. She was very troubled by this. And so I told the producers, and they said they had other Anti-Defamation League Jewish groups write to them about those depictions. And we were all in shock because it was so affectionate and loving, and it was so full of adoring these people who were dying out. So oddly, the pushback came within our families and the outside world. I don't remember having pushback from the suits, but I wasn't in the room with them. So I'm not sure what happened there.
Well, how did that make you feel? I mean, did you did you understand your mom's perspective? Did you side with it, or like, what was your take on all that? Like, was it like, well, what we're trying to do is like a positive thing? Like, how did you kind of digest all of that?
Well, for comedians, it's always a sensitive edge. Things that even more so now that everybody's so woke. There were things that we put out in all innocence that hurt some people's feelings. And you could say they don't have a sense of humor, or you can say they have trauma. They have trauma, and we can't really put salt in that wound. So I think it's gotten worse now, but I think we went for the edge. I think we were on an off-net. We were not on network television. We didn't have as many censors around. Nickelodeon was relatively lenient. And we got away with it for a number of years. And I think the reruns still hold up. I mean, that perspective still seems to hold up because it's done in a loving way by characters that are humanoid, but not really humans you can hold responsible. So I think we got away with it for quite a while. Wow, did you find something offensive in them?
No, not at all. I mean, I was just, like I didn't. I had never heard that side of it. I think that what I'm more curious about, and I don't know the answer to this because I don't have kids, but I kind of wonder if anything with that kind of depth is really going on in kids' cartoons these days. I'd like to think it is, but when you look at what my generation had with the Rugrats, stuff like Rocko's Modern Life, Ren and Stimpy, there was a lot of depth to that stuff. And maybe it's just because that was kind of my era, so I got the rose glasses on, but I kind of wonder if that kind of depth is going on today. I hope it is.
Well, we may have laid a groundwork in infants for this kind of thinking, but I think the children were watching it merely from the animation point of view, the humor, the common jokes that babies had about the bathroom, about who's bigger, who's littler. And then the parents were listening to it at a whole other level. I mean, the show babysat the parents and the babies, which was kind of a great coup. That may have been true for other young people's shows, but I personally, as an adult, never really got into Sesame Street or Mr. Rogers. They were too sweet for me. I liked things that were more edgy, like Soupy Sales was my mentor. I don't know if you remember, it's way before your time. Soupy Sales was the guy that had hands. There were hand puppets that came into the screen and fought with him, and they would put pies in his face. And he asked the children at one point to go into their parents' wallets and get out little green pieces of paper and mail them to the network. And a lot of children did, and he got thrown off the air. I mean, I got him when I was like 9. That was my kind of humor. So maybe babies were watching it with that edgy sort of humor because their parents had it. We got a lot of fan mail from parents for that show, that it was a teaching tool, that it was a calmative for the babies. One girlfriend of mine who's a superpower, her daughter was over my house and she said, I wouldn't have gone through my childhood if it wasn't for Dee Dee Pickles. She said, you were my mother figure because my mom wasn't home and my nanny wasn't that interested in me. And Dee Dee and that show were like my company for 3 or 4 hours a day.
That's incredible. I mean, that's got to make you feel incredible, right? Like that's.
Yeah, it made me feel bad about my girlfriend, though. Where the hell? C'est la vie, the working parent. It's a dilemma.
So the other thing I wanted to bring up on this, and this is just like, how could I not ask you? Are you familiar with the conspiracy theory about the Rugrats? Have you heard it?
No.
Oh, I think it's just something someone concocted online, again, because it stood the test of time and people still love it. But the conspiracy theory that I think is just so goofy and a lot of fun. Also very dark, but the babies are not alive. They're all in Angelica's imagination. So in reality, Angelica is actually an adult and she is schizophrenic or has some issues, and Susie is treating her. Susie is her psychiatrist. And so the babies are all in her imagination, and they're who she thought she should have grown up with. But in reality, Chucky died at childbirth. That's why Stu, or what's Chucky's dad's name? That's why he's so Drew. So that's why he's so kind of always, sad and stuff. Tommy was a stillborn, and that's why his dad makes toys, because he wanted to make toys for the son he never had. Phil and Lil were actually just aborted. That's why, like, Angelica didn't know if it was going to be a boy or a girl. So there was one of each, and they were twins. And they're all in Angelica's imagination, and Susie is treating Angelica. And that's why whenever Susie comes in, she kind of saves the day. And whenever Angelica gets really mad, the babies kind of disperse. So that's sort of it was just some goofy thing that started.
That people don't have enough to do in their lives. Ruin something that was such an act of sweetness and love. I'm just very sad about that.
Well, I'm sorry I had to bring that to you. I didn't mean to cause you sadness, but yeah.
It's interesting. I just feel for these poor people that have nothing better to do.
To make up conspiracy theories about cartoons?
A cartoon, yeah.
Hey, I read it, so what's that say about me? I guess maybe I'm part of the problem.
No, you're skimming the bottom of the surface is what you're doing for interest. I'm sorry you're so bored.
I'm not bored. The world is way too big for me to be bored.
Good.
This was just me. This was just me reading something when I couldn't fall asleep. That's That's really what it was.
When you should be writing in your brain, not reading.
That's fair. Next time I want to take a deep dive into cartoon conspiracy theories, I'm just going to try to write instead. But then what if I end up making up my own?
Oh, well, that's your bailiwick, I guess. World. Welcome to it.
So you've done a lot of different things in different capacities. Do you have a favorite? Do you prefer stage acting? Do you prefer film? Do you prefer animation, VO? Do you have a favorite?
I love being in good stories with other really good people. Mm-hmm. And I don't care where they are, but I do prefer being interactive on camera or on stage.
Okay.
It's my favorite. I miss it. Haven't had it since class, doing classes.
Why is that your favorite?
Oh, because I thrive on the electricity between people. I'm a cannibal for that. It excites me. It turns me on. It gives me ideas. It enlarges my own being. So that's where I really thrive best. And I also, to sublimate, I teach one-on-one online. I teach charisma to the shy. I direct people's videos for their websites. This is my little side hustle. My website's called charismatizing.com. And I've worked with all different kinds of people, from Christian journalists to politicians, realtors, lawyers, a lot of therapists, a surfer guy now who wants to do a promotional video for his surfing. And he's very laid back, man. I mean, he's like, whoa, and I really got to get him into the camera, to present himself as somebody you're safe with as a surfing teacher.
Well, is he going to be surfing for the video? Because if so, he also needs a GoPro and a good one.
Yeah, we'll cut away to that, but mostly we need him just to do a good 59-second spokesperson for himself and his work. And that's very hard for a lot of people who aren't, verbal. That's a rule. But they've got to do. It's a new era. You got to be able to speak. You got to be able to have a website that really communicates to the soul of people.
So we kind of touched on this just organically throughout the interview, but I wanted to talk to you just about how has the industry changed since you've been a part of it? I mean, how has, and then like a follow up on all of that, what do you think the future is for LA? I mean, so much has changed between, just the industry evolving, and then of course the pandemic, and then recently we had the strike. Where do you see things going, and how has it changed?
Well, AI is certainly a threat, but I think, and I hope, that we will always need the electricity that happens with a human brain, the ingenuity, the originality, the spontaneity. I have to believe in that, and that it'll be captured in whatever different ways. I can't even anticipate the ways it might be captured. It does look darker than it's ever been for people my age. I will say that. There's like 12 women that have it all sewn up. Nowadays when I audition for something, it's between the ages of 50 and 80. They have us all in this one category. And, grandma between 50 and 80. And it's like there's a lot of terrific actresses between 50 and 80 who are inventing, ways to say, how are you? So it's really a very challenging time for me. It's not been a good period. This switch to self-taping. I'm not a geek. I don't really love the technology. I've made these alterations, for example, to talk to you today. But it's not my favorite kind of work. And all of us moan and groan about it. Those of us who are not born cable ready, computer ready, we've had to learn all these new skills after studying Shakespeare and opera and classical dancing, ballet. I mean, it's really kind of interesting how my cartoon voices have kind of made me, bought my house, when I have so many other skills that are not getting, tapped. But that was for me. I have girlfriends that I go to a dance class with on Sundays, and we're not going to be dancing in any Broadway shows, God knows. But we love those muscles that it awakens, and we love dancing with other people. So this is our private joy, collaborating with other people.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I remember a friend of mine, like we were just, it was a comedian colleague of mine, and she, she had started, she was a generation or two before me, and we were just kind of just talking about everything, and she just goes, it's so much more corporate now. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And she goes, well, I feel like back in the day, you were a comedian. You were just a comedian. Now you got to be a social media marketer. You got to be a video editor. You got to be a content curator. You got to be, and it can get, I think at the end of the day, the creative work is still largely the same. There's just all these other things that you just have to do to get it out there.
I know. It's really frustrating. One of the things I'm doing now is I'm doing these Comic-Cons. I'm doing the Pasadena Comic-Con on the 28th here in Los Angeles because I get to engage with the actual people and hear what they like and hear what turned them on. And I also get to sell my book, which I just happen to have a copy of right here. I happen to have a copy of my book. And I get to do the voices for their phone messages. And it's like in a very small way, I have a captive audience, like one audience person at a time to engage with. And so it's really been kind of more rewarding than I thought it would be. There are a lot of these shows where I did one outside of Boston, and it was kind of a cosplay event. The people that attended were all in costumes, and they wanted me to recognize them. And I wasn't hip enough to the idiom that I could. I'd say, well, I think you're some kind of Marvel guy. And they would demand, like, well, I'm such and such. And I'd say, you are. Yes, of course you are. So there's a lot of that. I'm getting to know who the real audience is by doing these events.
What's some of the feedback you get? I mean, is it all like kind of Dee Dee Pickles centric, or what are some of the thoughts you get from folks?
This other character I played, this Miss Musso character, on Parker Lewis. A lot of people remember me for that. Some people who are elderly remember me from Fridays, which was in the late 70s, early 80s. Some people remember me from Seinfeld. I was on it a couple of times. So I have different pockets of recognition. I'm just hoping I'll still have my role on some really cutting edge show as I have before that will give me a voice in the new era. I don't know what my chances are. There's so many wonderful actors, but it's my hope.
Well, Melanie, in closing here, please plug away. Tell everyone where they can find you, where they can get your book. Let everyone know.
Oh, well, my book is everywhere that you can buy online books. Google, Apple Books, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, of course. It's called Odd Woman Out, and it's about the psyche of an actor, someone trying to become a human being by playing roles. Before one learns how to become a human being, one tries on different perspectives and points of view. And a lot of people have written me to say how much it meant to them. They're very touched by it. And if they want to work on their personae, and I've got a million of them, they can write me at charismatizing.com. That's my website, and fill out the contact information. And I'm happy to give them a free 10-minute coaching session on Skype or FaceTime to give a sample of how I would help them enhance their personas for dating, for pitching, for doing a video, for anything that comes up in which they are in the public sphere, high-stakes public sphere. So.
Well, Melanie, thank you so much for doing this. I'm so glad we got to cross paths in person, and hopefully we'll get to do more shows together as well, because that was an incredible evening.
Thank you. I hope so too, Ron. It was really fun. And thanks for inviting me on.
That was Melanie Chartoff. Be sure to check out her stuff, grab her books. Music for the 1000 podcast is provided by Andrew Saxena. Be sure to check out his podcast, the Bay Watching Podcast, wherever you get your podcast. If you want to support this show on the sustainability end, patreon.com/Ron Placone. For a give what you can level, you get all kinds of cool perks. You can attend any of the virtual screenings for free. I'll make you a theme song. You get a bonus podcast between Drew and myself. You get some behind the scenes footage, some on the ground stuff that Drew and I do. It's a great time, and that's all for a give what you can level. All right, we are approaching 30. What was I up to at age 26? I think Was I in Nashville by then? I think I might have been living in Nashville by the time I was 26. Or I might have still been in graduate school. All right, to be continued. I got to look that one up. See y'all next week. Hey guys, Ron Placone here. Take your own 1,000 challenge. No, you don't need to interview 1,000 people, although if you want to do that, go for it. Your 1,000 challenge can be whatever you want. Maybe you want to call a friend out of the blue once a week. Maybe you want to read a book every month. Maybe you want to start a different garden every season. I guess that might be dependent on where you live. Look, the point of the challenge is taking on an endeavor that enriches your life in some way, and it can be measured. And then, of course, you do it regularly. That's what 1,000 is doing for me and hopefully for you too. The main reason for this podcast and every podcast I've ever done is to build community. So take your own challenge. Then join our Facebook group. It's called 1,000 What's Your Challenge? ? That's 1,000 What's Your Challenge ? And post about what your 1,000 challenge is and the progress you're making. All I ask is that people be encouraging of each other's challenges. This is personal and vulnerable, so be cool. There's enough negativity on social media. We don't need to add to it. For those of you who aren't on Facebook, hopefully in the future we'll be expanding to places like Discord, Reddit, but for now, we're starting on Facebook. And again, that Facebook group is called 1,000 What's Your Challenge? See you there.